So, hello guys. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. Welcome to yet another Design Hour by Kentigo Design Team. Thank you for joining us today. And my name is Peter, and I'll be your host today. I know it's been a while since we held an event, but we're back, and this time we bring a new format with us. So instead of one speaker and just one long talk, today we will see 3 different speakers, and we will be talking about different but very interesting topics. So who will be speaking today? First, we will hear from our designer Veronika Hradilová about designing for NGOs and how can you benefit from volunteering regardless of your professional level. In the second talk, we will switch to the realm of user research, and our fantastic user researcher Anna Rosická will guide us through note-taking, and not just in the context of user interviews or usability testings. And today's speaker lineup will be closed by a design leader for our Kentigo Experience product, Martin Florián, who will give us a quite interesting and valuable pointers on how to create a product that delights its users. Not to forget a bit of organizational info. How will the whole today's event go? Each talk will take approximately 20-ish minutes, and each will be followed by a short Q&A session. And after the last talk, we'll have a longer Q&A to answer all your questions we did not cover in the short ones. So if you'd have a question, please use Slido, either on slido.com or on their phone app. It's quite good. With the hashtag Design Hour, or just use the QR code on the screen. Just please do not hesitate to ask your questions right away. Since we're streaming, this video feed usually has a couple minutes of delay, so we'll get to the questions with some delay as well. So please take this into account. We'll definitely answer all the questions in the final big Q&A. If you encounter any problems or anything regarding the feed, just please let us know in the YouTube comment section or on our socials. We'll be monitoring them throughout the whole talk. And I think that's it from my side. So right now, without further ado, please welcome Veronika Hradilová. And Veronika, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Hi, guys. Okay, I hope you can hear me well. So thanks, Peter, for your lovely introduction. Thanks, everyone, also for coming. I'm happy that this topic resonates with you, unless you wait for the other talks, which is also fine. Anyway, you're here. My name is Veronika. I work as a UX designer in Kentigo. And today I want to dedicate a few moments to hopefully inspire you to put more, emphasis on, let's say, real projects, or even helping non-profit projects rather than redesigning, well-known tools we all know and use. And, believe me or not, very common thing to do. So let's get to it. My question here is, why is it that designers love to, unsolicitedly, needed to say, Spotify, Facebook, Netflix, you name it. Yeah. For the record, just, you can hit dribble and okay, yeah, the video sounds super. And you can see that if you type Spotify redesign, you'll get the idea how many designers felt tempted. So yeah, here you go. There are pretty many. So my question for you is, have you ever had the urge to do it? And actually, you can use the Slido to let me know. I would be pretty interested in that. My confession is that I did have the urge. In the past, I was a heavy Facebook user, and the tool didn't work for me that much. so I didn't do it in the end, though it crossed my mind. And I think I had some, solid reasons for that, because I'm the user, and I know, how it works. I know the flaws. I see them. I see all of them. They make me angry. And I'm feeling pretty confident I can design it better, right? So, and maybe I can do some case study, about it, and then I put it into my portfolio, and it will look really crisp there, and maybe they will see it and eventually hire me. So yeah, all of this crossed my mind. And there's a bunch of things that, nudges up to go sit behind a computer and, redraw the user interface. But the truth is, the only thing we can really be sure about is that we are the users of the product. And, that's it. Can we really design it better? Would anyone of the organization even look at it and consider to invite us for the interview? I don't really know. Haven't heard of such case. But as you probably already found out, I'm not such a fan of those Spotify and Netflix redesigns. But also bear in mind that it's just my personal opinion, and I certainly don't know what's best for you. So by this slide, I want to say that it ultimately boils down to your whys and motivations. So what I wanted to say is that you might want to practice some interaction design skills. Maybe you just want to get better at visual design, or maybe you have some other motivation. So it's completely okay and valid. So it's just important to go find yours, which sounds like a very basic idea, but it's actually a start for anything else. When I thought about it, given my experience with non-profit organizations, which I will also talk about in a while, I realized there are not many things that you can learn from those. I call them dummy projects, like those Spotify, Netflix, Facebook redesigns. So let's have a quick look together, just very briefly. Firstly, there's communication context, which is a huge one for me personally, like the most challenging part. That being said, like successful design is never born, in vacuum. There's always important context, and as an outsider, you won't probably get it unless you're employed in the company. And there's communication, communication back and forth with stakeholders, PM, devs. You can definitely get that when you work on real projects, not that much in those dummy projects. Then there is this topic of finding the right problem and then finding the solution to it. I think those things are very connected to companies' higher goals, the strategy, but also time, possibilities, also money. In those dummy projects, I don't think you would spend so much time there, because you probably just craft some problem and then just, craft some solution to it that would suit you. So, that's my guess. Then there's research, definitely. That's also a big one. And for a dummy project, it's I think it's a bit iffy. To some extent, you can test your ideas. You can do some desk research probably, but you probably don't get into any internal insights. So you can always practice also your UI design. You can polish your visual design skills, which is fine on both sides. But you also want to probably measure it. So setting up some experiments and follow-up data is usually doable within an organization, but it's harder, on the other side, redesigning something dummy. And as a big bonus, you can teach someone during the way and maybe help them. So that was actually also my motivation. Well, what I want to demonstrate here, there are huge benefits of doing something, I call it real, than just picking up something dummy. I also believe that opportunities are around us. Be it supporting some local project, or There are plenty of non-profit, non-governmental organizations that might want to help with their digital presence. In Czech Republic, there's a huge community of people under the umbrella of Česko Digital with very interesting projects. So it's there, so you can go get it. Well, me personally, I decided to focus my energy to Doctors Without Borders. In Czech, it's Lékaři bez hranic. They provide medical care in areas where it's most needed, oftentimes war zoned areas, mostly poor countries. And my motivation was simple. For quite a long time, I've been following them, and I always wanted to sort of help. Though, can I fix human bodies? No, obviously not. But can I fix websites? Well, I feel confident there, pretty much. So I will briefly talk you through the cooperation with this nonprofit organization. Unfortunately, I won't go much into details as we're like short of time today, but you can definitely reach out to me afterwards or just, put your questions into Slido and hopefully we will get back to them if you would be interested. So through like simple volunteering registration on the website, I let them know that I am me, I want to help, and just by the way, I'm a designer. I didn't really expect them to contact me about helping with UX of the website. So I was, ready to be handing out some leaflets. That's what volunteers do, right? So I was quite surprised that they very shortly after reach out that they want some UX help. It was like very refreshing. And after some phone calls and email communication, we shook hands and decided on some, approximate time frame and next steps. One of the most important steps for me was like specifying a brief and somehow like framing the cooperation and setting up expectations, like what do they want, what they need, what I want from it. And by the way, we want to improve website is not very good brief. In our case, it was like fixing experience for website users who want to get easily connected with organization, find out what the organization does and how it's financed, and learn about events they do. And to be honest, I was also a little bit surprised how easy it was for me to get these things from them. Because they were like highly professional and I wasn't really expecting that. Shame on me, yes. Though I think there's this myth of like nonprofit organizations being a bit chaotic, not knowing what they need. So my experience here with them was really nice, that they sensed they had a problem, they knew that they need UX help, and they specified those issues, they required some time plan. So for me, it was like pleasant surprise. With help of the staff, I got context about the organization, gathered some data from analytics, Hotjar, existing feedback, and their hypothesis, what's not working very well. And with those prospects and my insights, I decided to test some of those hypotheses with users. That meant creating some research design, hiring some people for the interviews. So that was it. I conducted several usability testings on the website to test those hypotheses. And the most exciting part of it was that they actually wanted to learn how to conduct such usability testing themselves. That was, another pleasant surprise, which I thought to myself, wow, I didn't think of that. I can teach them and they will be able to test other things in future by themselves. And also the other day, I received a phone call from the lady from the organization who was working on the web for a long time. And she interviewed one of the users. And she told me like she was really shocked that what she saw during the interview, and admitted that when she saw it, the users really struggled to find some fundamental things like, I don't know, contact information, she had really this, aha moment. So for her, it was really good to see it for herself. So she then was really convinced that there are some troubles. So together we spotted some issues, and I also did audit of the website myself, and it put all the data together with those usability testing findings for some, data synthesis, and kind of presented them to the organization. These are the problems. I suggest to fix them this way with some priorities that I also suggested. But needed to say that these solutions needed to be also in balance with the web development. They knew that they couldn't simply afford some major design changes. So speaking of that, these are the constraints you encounter only when working on something real, right? Because there are always obstacles, and we as designers very often need to get creative to solve those problems in despite of that. And yeah, to my excitement, the changes I suggested were implemented, or some changes were implemented, and also managed to do a little bit of measuring, specifically how long would it take users to find certain information before and after redesign, which gave us a hint that it was actually we didn't get it worse by the redesign, and we actually improved it. So that was nice. I also tried to get more insights from them after the redesign, but then the COVID thing hit, and they had obviously some other priorities. So we ended up there, and that was it. So I think it was like really, really brief introduction to the world of nonprofit. I only have one experience, and this is this project. Though I believe designers, and not just them, can learn so much more working on real things, real projects with real people, with context, and also some constraints, because constraints give you that's the real world with constraints. And it doesn't really matter if you're experienced or not. You can, if you build your UX portfolio, you can, with real projects, you can try to go through the whole design process, not just UI. And I can say that as we are hiring UX designers, we definitely ask about the whole design process, not just some, UI pictures. And not very sufficient for us. So presenting us with some big, that doesn't need to be a big project, but project from A to Z is a big plus. And I found my only experience with nonprofit organization as a designer very pleasurable. It felt very professional. Don't worry about that. And I feel that we can give them much more than just, this is job done, here is fixed on a silver plate, but we can show them how to do it, and they would be able to help themselves next time, maybe without you to some extent, and they might not be so dependent on others, which is, I think, the sustainable way. So I guess that's all. Thank you very much. Feel free to connect with me via LinkedIn or Twitter. And I think there might be some time for questions. So I'm back to you, Peter.
Thank you, Veronika. That was really, really, really awesome. Before we jump into questions on Slido, there started a couple of things about Netflix and their UX. So we may discuss that as well. I wanted to ask you if there was anything that you were surprised by during this cooperation, in a good or in a bad way. Anything that caught you like, okay, I didn't expect this?
Yeah, I think the one thing I also mentioned was how professional it was. You know, when you say the word of non-profit, I really thought about it as very like chaotic world, and people don't know what they're doing, and it's very like, you know, we don't have money, so it's just everything, you know, very messy. And I was really didn't expecting that, you know, they were very organized, they clearly knew what they were doing, and the fact that they require, you know, they knew that they need UX help was like, wow, it just don't happen that often, I would say. So I think this was surprising for me in a good way. I don't think, as I'm thinking about it right now, that there was some like negative surprise. Yeah, like things didn't go according to plan. Like as always, you know, I planned to do one round of interviews before the redesign and then after the redesign, which, you know, didn't work out because of the time. But that wasn't that surprising. Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's it. Mm-hmm.
Jump to Slido. What do we have here? Yeah, there's some stuff about Netflix and how their UX totally sucks, and why is that and in such a big company. Any takes on that? I think it was
Yeah,
just connected to the.
Yeah, why is Netflix so bad? Yeah, if Netflix is so bad, why is it like that? Well, well, I don't think Netflix is bad. That's for the start. I think people, I don't think people think that they have certain needs, and they want their needs to be covered by the tool. So they had the urge to redesign it. But, you know, fundamentally, I don't think that like these tools are bad, and they have bad UX. So yeah, I think the other question is similar. Such a big company and such bad UX. Why is that? Anonymous, you tell me. Sorry.
It's also connected to the context you mentioned. Like, okay, we can just imagine the context and needs and the priorities that were there. So it's just all hypothetical from our side. Unless there's anyone in the audience working for Netflix, just please let us know and explain this all to us.
I think like many, you know, what we see on the screen, what we see on the Facebook side, Netflix side, Spotify side, these are all like design decisions that are based on not just, you know, on what users want, but also, you know, there are strategic decisions. There are some like higher goals, and we as users, we don't see it. So I think that might be a reason. You know, it's not just about the users, what they want. So I think we just see a tiny bit of it. So we are, like I said, we are just outsiders, and we don't see inside the organization.
Just a quick one connected to this. I think we can answer the other one in the bigger Q&A afterwards. Where did you find people for user research and testing for a project like this?
Yeah, that's a good one. Well, given the website users are generally, you know, people like normal people who can visit the website and because they want to donate something, for example, you know, give some money or support the organization. So it could be, you know, anyone. So there wasn't some specific persona for the website. So it was very easy. I just, you know, asked my friends, I asked, you know, people around me. So it was really easy. But to make it more like diverse, I also asked some people who had like the medical background, because there are also some people who visit the website who want to be part of the mission, you know, who want to go for a mission with them. So they want to work as doctors with them. So I asked some guys, some friends who were doctors, who are doctors. So it was really easy, just friends. Yeah.
All right, so that's for the Q&A right now, and we'll move on to thank you, Veronika, again for great answers and great talk. It was very inspiring. And we'll move on to another speaker. And this time I'll welcome Anna to stage.
Hi, everyone.
Anna will guide us through taking notable notes. So
thank you.
Hit it off. Stage is yours.
Okay, so can you share my presentation?
Yeah,
perfect.
Here you go.
Great. Yeah, so hello again, everyone. My name is Anna, and I work as a UX researcher at Kentico. And what I'll be talking about today are notes, and more specifically, note-taking and user research, the kind of process, producing of notes that you can then later on analyze as part of the research. So just to make clear at the beginning, I won't be talking as much about notes that you can take, for example, during meetings or something like that. But I believe that there will be some takeaways for anyone who does any kind of notes as part of their work, maybe. So let me start this talk with a confession. If there's one thing that I hate about user research in my job, then it's note-taking. It can be lengthy, it can be boring, sometimes even painful. You can spend hours rewatching a video, recording like minute by minute and trying to decipher what it is that the participant was saying about your product at the moment. And maybe if you're taking notes on the go, it can feel like going back to school, trying to take notes on a mathematics lecture by a teacher who drank too much coffee, for example, something like that. And it can be very cognitively demanding. So note-taking can be a challenge, and it is challenging for me as well. And naturally, as a researcher, when I decided to solve this problem, a part of the solution for me was a bit of research. So in this talk, I'll talk you through what I found, and I'll start with explaining what's the point of notes in the first place. And then I'll walk you through something like a fails compilation or frequent mistakes with note-taking. And while doing so, I'll also always share with you how I tried to solve those mistakes and some tips and tricks that I found along the way. So let's start with the whys. Many people see note-taking as a kind of necessary evil that they just want to fly through and never go back to it again. It took me myself a while to realize that note-taking actually is a core user research skill, just like interview facilitation or data synthesis or presentation skills. You don't usually do research with just some raw video recordings and then magic would happen and you'd get a full list of usability issues or some user insights to pull out of your sleeve. So the path from user interviews or user observations to your results is usually a bit longer, and note-taking is a part of this path. It is a crucial part of the research that you do. So let us say that the purpose of notes is to capture some observations and insights in such a format that can help you reach your research goals. And I'll come back to this definition later on as well. But for now, let's look at what good research notes look like and what are their advantages. So firstly, good research notes are traceable. You want to ensure that you can always trace your research results back to the raw data, and so to ensure that your understanding of the users is not biased and it is truly data-based. Second, good notes are future-proof. Usually in your research, you focus on a specific area of the product or a specific topic maybe, but during your sessions with the participants, you come across things that might be useful later on, but that don't make it to your research report. And your notes might be useful for some future analysis. And last but not least, good research notes enable you to share what happened in a research session with other researchers or colleagues. And they can then quickly scan through your notes without having to rewatch the whole session and still find the information that they need. So that's the theory, but things can get notably out of hand. So that's what I'll focus on from now on. let's come back to the definition that I've shown you earlier. The purpose of notes is to capture things. So what can go wrong with capturing things? Fail number one that you can make is relying on recordings too much. Recordings are awesome, but the obvious reason for why they're problematic is that recordings fail. You may call yourself lucky if you're even permitted to record your interaction with the user. And then it can also still disappear, or you can have some problem, some technical issue, and it does happen. But there is one perhaps less obvious problem with relying on recordings too much, and that's the fact that it makes you to waste time. Recordings take just as long to listen to, or sometimes even longer than the original session. And if you have like maybe 5 or 10 interviews even, this can be quite a lot of time. So rewatching the recordings and taking notes only afterwards, that used to be a common approach in our UX team as well. And when I was recently asked to do a usability testing of our whole app as part of a redesign, I didn't have much time at hand and I wanted to save some. So I decided to get at least some notes on the go. And I knew right away that I wouldn't be able to facilitate the usability testing and still at the same time make some detailed and usable notes. So I decided to get some help. And I was lucky enough that there was a UX designer on each call. So I just asked them to take notes on the go. So that's one option that you can go for. Many people have to take the notes themselves. And it can be done as well. It's just very demanding. And there's also a third alternative. You can use the note-taking process as a way to engage your stakeholders. You can do something like group note-taking. There's even some resources on how to organize a whole session. I can put a link to some resource like that later on in the chat or somewhere maybe. And so you can use other people to take notes for you. But yeah, while you have these options and you can try to take as many notes as you can during the session itself, I just like to highlight that I'm by no way implying that recordings are bad. They are still good. They're very useful. Just relying on them too much is not a good idea for several reasons. Okay, so now let's go back to the definition that I shared earlier. So we'll be focusing on the format now. And yeah, so note-taking, be it on the go or maybe based on the recording that you already have, it's always a skill. And if you're not used to it, it can be very hard to know like what you should focus on and how much detail you should go into, etc. And as mentioned, I tried to have someone help me with note-taking in this usability testing that I did quite recently. And the results were interesting. Firstly, my note-takers did suffer a bit. I think this may be the time to say sorry, guys, but it was cognitively demanding. It always is. Just recall the teacher that I mentioned at the beginning. But that's something that you can probably get used to. Anyway, the second interesting thing that I found was that there was quite a lot of variability in the notes format in the output that I had. So I realized that, coming back to the format, some people, for example, would go into more detail, some people into less detail, and sometimes it was not exactly the kind of detail that I needed. So I realized that there were two main mistakes that I did, which caused this trouble. And the first one was that I didn't ensure that the note takers would have sufficient familiarity with the research questions that I was having. So, for example, a designer who was involved in preparing the whole usability testing and knew the hypotheses that we were testing and the parts of the app that we were focusing on had a much easier job in this respect. And the second thing that can be there was a problem in this usability testing was an insufficient familiarity of the note takers with the note-taking format that I came up with, because I came up with quite a complex system. And as a wise guy once said, never spend 6 minutes doing something by hand when you can spend 6 hours failing to automate it. So in my attempt to save time, I created a monstrous table for this usability testing. It was the idea was that it should save time as a result. So there was a checklist that people were just checking, and there was some space for timestamps so that I could easily go back to the various parts of the recording. And yeah, so the idea behind it was probably great, but it ended up being not so usable for my note takers. So this is just an example of a part of the monstrous table that I had. And yeah, so I shouldn't wonder that it was hard for people, especially if they were doing it for the first time. So to sum up, if you want to get reliable notes, you first need to train your note takers. And as a proof, when I did the usability testing several times with some of the note takers, then I managed to get better results. And the notes tended to be a bit more according to what I needed in that case. So it definitely works, but you have to train the people. And yeah, so let's come back to our definition once again. So the purpose of notes is to capture observations. So let's focus on them now. So a super common fail in note-taking is noting down biased observations. People do have some cognitive biases when they observe something or listen to someone. And if you do user testing or user research, you probably have some previous understanding of the product or of the topic that you're asking about. And then when you're noting things down, you tend to mix up observations, interpretations, and quotes. And that's a huge problem, because if you want your notes to be truly reliable, you have to make sure that you discern between those three. There is a half-made up example from the usability testing that I mentioned. There was a case when a user had a task to set up something called workflow steps. And they found a button which filters by workflow steps. It doesn't set them up, actually. And what ended up being in the notes was the note that the user tried to filter something using this button. But that's actually not an observation, but an interpretation. Because the user didn't comment on what they were doing. They clicked on some button somewhere. And because the person who was taking the notes knew what the button should do, that's what they wrote. They wrote that the intention of the user was to filter the items. So a better way to do this would be to write down something like, so the user noticed the label workflows and then clicked on it, which filtered the items. So that's just one example. And the trick here is to try to put yourself into brackets. This sounds kind of abstract, but I mean it in two ways. So firstly, as a metaphor, and then a bit more literally. As a metaphor, a good idea when you're doing user research is, and that's maybe a bit of a tip for user research than usability testing, is to write down your previous understanding of the topic that you have in advance before doing any research. You can just write down everything that you know about the topic, and then you have it written down, and you can then more easily discern what is your interpretation of things and what is the understanding of your user, which you're trying to get to. And that's like a technique that can be useful for more exploratory research. And then the more literally meaning of this solution that I want to speak about is something like this. So if you observe something and have an interpretation of what that was, or if the user says something and you've got your own interpretation of it, you can literally put your interpretation into brackets when you're making notes. I know it sounds kind of obvious, but you would be surprised at how hard it can be for people and I definitely mean by myself as well, to discern the observations from the interpretations. And also, when you have any quotes, it's a good idea to mark them in a special way. Just maybe one last thing to prevent biased observations is to use that recording of yours if you're lucky enough to have one. You can use it after the session to go through your notes and make sure everything is correct and you're discerning observations from interpretations correctly. It can be very useful. Yeah, so for one final time, I promise, let's go back to this slide. And the last thing that I want to focus on are research goals and their role in note-taking. And if there's one thing I want you to remember from this talk, it's this, although it may sound quite obvious, but it's a really good thing to realize. Note-taking strategy can vary. You can choose various approaches of, well, with regards to thoroughness, for example, you can make almost verbatim transcripts of many interesting things, or you can just jot down some bullet points of the most important problems that you came across. You can also have a various degree, not a degree, but you can have various types of notes. So you can either write them down chronologically, like one after another as they appeared during the testing, or you can already start categorizing them into topics. And you can also focus on different things when you're observing your user or listening to them and then writing down your notes. And all those things should be chosen in advance according to the strategy that you have. This was also a problem for me during this usability testing that I mentioned. So the idea, actually, the goal of the whole usability testing that I was doing was to find any critical usability issues that could cause problems for us. And I chose quite a bit of a thorough approach. And that was not maybe the best idea, given the amount of time that I had. So it took me loads of time, and then the actual result that was needed was much shorter and much less detailed. And I could have prevented it if I started with a bit more planning. So whenever you're doing research, you're probably making some research plan at the beginning, like defining your research questions and preparing, like choosing your methods. And as part of this, all these choices, you can also make a choice of what kind of notes you'll be writing. Do you need details that you could use later on, or do you just need to have some really quick and dirty notes that you can then later on just complete when you have more time? And you can also make various other considerations. So if you want to take effective notes, you need to make note-taking strategy a part of your research plan. Great, so let's recap. These are the fails and the according solutions that I'd like you to take away from this talk. A good idea is to get some notes on the go, train your note takers, that can include yourself, put yourself into brackets, and plan your attack before you start it. I hope you found some of those things helpful, found some interesting tips. If you have further questions about notes, I hope you're going to share them in the Q&A. And anyway, I hope you took some notes, some useful notes, and thank you for your attention for now.
Great, thank you very much, Anna. Of course, there's quite a discussion in Slido, so let's move on there.
I'm curious.
So the first one is, do you think it's necessary to develop an interview guide so that non-UX researchers can participate in interviews and ensure consistency and standardization? What's your take on that?
So that's quite a complex question. I need to make sure I understand it correctly. So if it's necessary to develop an interview guide so that non-UX researchers, I assume the author of this means that maybe if you're doing some interviews, you want some non-UX researchers to ask questions themselves. For that case, I believe it's definitely great to prepare the other people, but maybe I'm not sure how this is meant, because an alternative would be just to have an interview guide, and if there's some people participating in the interviews, you can just have them follow the interview guide. They can have it at hand, and so that if you give maybe space for questions during the interview, they can then go through it and realize that, okay, I shouldn't ask this because that's something that we'll get to later on. But I'm not sure how this goes together with note-taking, really. So I'm not sure if I understood the question correctly. Yeah.
So just if the person who asked this wants to clarify, just please go ahead in the chat, and we'll get to that later. Sure.
But anyway, just one thing, I think it's always a good idea to have some sort of interview guide for yourself, even if there's no other researchers joining the research. It's a good idea to, of course, you don't always have to ask the same questions, but you want to make sure that you don't forget everything. Don't forget anything. So an interview guide is always a good idea.
Great. All right. Another one is a piece of disagreement. Like, I don't agree. If you don't record and only focus on making notes, you will miss stuff. And now we do a video call that is recorded, then you record on phone. I'm not sure how this was meant either, but I get the gist. Like, okay, it's.
Yeah. Should I take over? Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so. Of course, if you're recording, if you're making notes, it can be quite hard to also focus on everything that's happening, especially if it's like a usability testing session and you're trying to write everything down and you have to look at your own screen and then also at the screen of the participant maybe, or at the screen a screen that's being shared. So, of course, focusing on notes can distract you a bit as well, and sometimes a bit more than a bit. But there's, I think, if you're the person, if there's multiple people participating in a usability testing session or a user interview, then you always have more observers. So, for example, in the usability testing sessions that I mentioned, there was always me. There was one UX designer or UX researcher who would be taking notes. And then there was one of our developers, and we would discuss at the end what we have seen, like the most interesting things. And sometimes the designers did have trouble focusing on everything that was happening. Sometimes they would omit something. In such cases, it's useful if you can, for example, timestamp and just write down, okay, so this is the time when I was not sure what's happening. We have to come back to it later. And then you just go on with the notes. There's other tricks as well. And I think training is really useful for this, because the more you do this kind of note-taking, the better you get at it. I think that's maybe everything that I have to say to this.
Yeah, I think there's a clarification for the first one. For the note-taking standardization, so everyone is using the same terms and methods of note-taking to make collecting insights easier.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea, especially if you're trying to, for example, if it's a usability testing session, then it's definitely a good idea to, for example, have a checklist. If you're not really gathering like various qualitative insights and you're just testing hypotheses, then if you have a checklist, it's much easier, and everyone has the same checklist then. And not only does it ensure consistency, but at the same time, it also can enable you to automate things a bit. So it may be easier to to put the results together, to have all, for example, all notes related to some part of the app in one place later on, because you can use some table magic that can save you in this.
Great. Thank you very much for the answers, Anna. There's a few more questions, but we'll get to them in the end. So right now, let me welcome another one of our speakers, the last one, and that's Martin. Hi there.
Hi. Hello, everybody. Good evening. Thanks for sticking around. First, let me say thank you to Peter for putting all this together, and Vercha and Anna for great presentations. Thank you, guys. You set the bar quite high for me. Let me introduce myself. My name is Martin. I am a user experience designer and leader in Kentico Experience product. And today I want to talk to you about delightful experience and what it truly means to design for delight. So let's get right into it. Why delight, I see you ask. Let me read to you the quote by Don Norman, which you can see here. Pleasant things works better. If you put a plank on the ground, I can walk on it. It's functional. But if you put it 300 feet in the air, I'm not going to near it. Fear paralyzes you. It changes the way you think. It changes the way you think is the last sentence is actually the reason why you should care about delighting your users and customers, and why user feelings when interacting with the product are so important too, because they directly influence the way how the brain works and how the user work with your product. So if the product feels intimidating, people are not going to be happy using it. And one more, delight, as we know, is that magic that makes us fall in love with the product. And designing for delight means making a connection with your users, emotional connection, and reminding them there are real human beings and people behind the design and the product. In my first presentation, I had more definitions and text like this, but thanks to Peter, I decided to drop them and go right to the examples so you can thank him later. Let's go to the examples. This is a Google Nest. This is the thermostat from Google, for those of you who don't know. And there's no affiliation. I just like the product. So look at it. It's beautiful. It's beautiful to look at. It's intuitive. You want to touch it. And not only it's beautiful, but it's smart. It learns what temperatures you like. When you come home, it learns your schedule. It's amazing. So keep this in mind while comparing it with this. This is the example of thermostat from our office buildings, and I have the pleasure to operate this nearly every day. So believe me when I say that this thing brings nothing but misery in everyone's lives. I mean, if you're trying to set the temperature, you either have to constantly look in the manual or have some stickers on it. We already did it in our design team, and we have just stickers saying which temperature is good for us. So this one is neither pleasant nor functional. It's just awful. Let's move on to the cars. I love cars. Not only they are very exciting, but on the interior, there are a lot of great and bad examples of UX, and I love it. So this is the way most car manufacturers are moving towards today. It's this big touchscreen, and it's amazing. It opens a world of opportunities. Everything is hidden behind nice interface, and user is guided to all of these settings. As you can see here, there are a lot of readings and distance scanning and speed measuring. It reads the signs, and you can just click it, and it takes you to the right settings. It's amazing. While you're standing, because if the car is moving, actually, even the person in the commercial is showing this off while the car is standing. They're not there to drive it. Because have you ever tried operating this while on typical Czech bumpy road? I mean, it's not impossible, but it's not ideal. So let's take a look at the other end of the spectrum with these examples. As you can see here, nothing is hidden by the interface. It almost seems like everything is offered to the user at the same time. And the user can feel overwhelmed by this. It almost seems like you have to know where to touch. Nothing is like, nobody guides you. And otherwise you just don't find the feature. You don't know how to. So this is not ideal as well. And of course there is a middle ground, which is this. And this is just, let's use a touchscreen, but it makes sense. Here BMW tried to do that. They kept just a couple of buttons handy near the air vents, so you could operate the aircon, but nothing else. Everything else is hidden behind, and you still get the benefit of the large, nice display. Interior is not cluttered. It's very nice, sleek, yet functional. It combines both ways. So far, I have used expressions like behavior, function, pretty, beautiful, lovely, and so on to describe the products. And let's take a look if we can associate these words with how actually brain is processing the information we are giving it. So the brain is processing the information in several levels. There is a visceral level, which is responsible for the first feeling, for the initial impact of the product. And therefore we can associate it with words like beautiful, pretty, and lovely. There's a behavioral level, which is processing the total experience of using the product. So that means how it performs. Is it responsive? Is it reliable? Does it actually do the job? So words like smart, functional, behavior. And then there's one more, which isn't immediately apparent from the words I used. I'm not going to ask you if you can guess it, because it's in the annotation of my talk. It's the reflective level, of course. And this one is me thinking about the product and thinking about what it made me feel. So the emotions the product evokes in the user. Now we can go back to our examples and see how completely differently they work with each level: visceral, behavioral, and reflective. And you can see, and you could probably hear that as well while I was talking about it, how much different these products are. So yeah, 3 levels of processing the information, 3 levels that we as designers need to address to make a good design. So how can we design for these 3 levels? Let's take them apart. And let's do visceral first, because this one is easy. Visceral level is all about surface delight. So to say, the things on top. Yeah, this is first feeling, as I said, the initial impact of the product. And therefore, we can very easily address it with animations, tactile transitions, microcopy, beautiful, relevant, high-resolution imagery, sound interactions, tailored experience, and brand personality. I have a couple of examples here, and just let's quickly scroll through them. Some animations, transitions, mostly on handheld devices, very useful. Microcopy. There's some typical page not found, which are not very usable, but they are trying to be funny. Images, sound interactions. This is actually very funny. If you don't know that this is designer size, you can try it in your design team. It's very good. Tailored experience. Yeah, exactly. I'm much more likely to buy this bottle of Coke than if it wasn't my name on it. And brand personality. Here is the MailChimp giving you high five after you sent like 3,000 emails. It's very good. Of course, some of these have overlap to other levels of processing the information, mainly these last 2, tailored experience. This has overlap to behavioral design because it has something to do how we behave. You may imagine services like YouTube or Netflix. We were talking about Netflix earlier. They are giving you suggestions what to watch next. So it tailors the experience towards you. And brand personality. Anything connected to the brand has overlap to the reflective design. So that was visceral. 1 done, 2 to go. Now behavioral level. How to make a good behavioral design. This is pyramid of users' needs, which I'm going to use to demonstrate what I mean. Designing for behavioral level means creating a product that is functional, reliable, and usable. This is first. And this is hard because this involves us as the designers, and we have to do our job right, because we need to talk to our customers and users, and we need to understand them deeply. And making good behavioral design often means designing and creating things that users don't even know they need. And not only this, in case of existing products, not new features, we should reduce obstacles. So we should test our designs, reduce obstacles, and change them into points when we can delight them. If your product or service lacks basic functionality or reliability, adding delighters from the last couple of slides won't help, and it will probably fail to provide any benefits to users. Any additional value, nothing like that will happen. But if your product already is usable, reliable, and functional, half the battle is won. Again, we can go back to our examples with the cars this time. And here you can see that surface visceral delight was used in the Skoda example, in the first one, because they hidden everything in the attempt to make the inside of the car very beautiful. But they hidden everything, even air conditioning, which is not very intuitive in here. The middle example, I don't even know what car that is, but this is, to me, probably the worst, because it seems like they sprinkled sort of delighters on top of it here and tried to make it exciting by tilting the menu and the items, the buttons. I mean, it really doesn't work, and it's not useful nor functional. And of course, the example with BMW taking care of both levels seriously, because they just hidden the things that you don't need and just are better to operate it from the user interface of the big touch screen. Let's move to the reflective level. A reflective level is actually hardest to achieve because it works in retrospect. The impact of the product comes through the reflection, me talking about it, remembering what was happening when I used the products and how it made me feel. So not only that I have to satisfy all users' needs from the pyramid I showed you earlier, but I have to add meaning on top, something that means something for me personally. And meaning is not only about the product, but about the message that the product sends out. Because buying the product, you as a person are supporting that message and the brand. Here is a couple of examples we can take a look about on, for example, Apple or Rolexes. Have you ever bought watches from Rolex? I mean, it's going to be probably 10, 20 times more expensive than your regular Casio watch and probably do half the things. But do you really buy them for the functional design? No, you buy them because it sends the message, sends some message to your audience or even to you. It means something to you. Or the Nike. If you buy Nike sneakers, what kind of message does that send? By the way, do you know about Nike Go Fly Ease sneakers? The best product design I've seen in a while. If you don't know, check that out because this is perfect, and the story behind it as well. Or we can take a look at Tesla, because do you buy the Tesla because the great coach build quality inside? Probably not, because it's not very good, especially in latest models. But you buy that because you trust Elon Musk's vision, or you trust the brand, or you are aware of environment and you want to help, something like that. So it has deep personal meaning for you. And all of these brands here have some message behind them. So once you achieve this, once you achieve good reflective design, once you satisfy all the layers of the pyramid, understand your users deeply, drop frustrators, add some delighters, and you have strong message that resonates with your users, then you can say that you have addressed all three levels of the design and the processing of the brain. And you probably achieved something called deep delight. And this is something we should all aim at. Thank you very much. Back to you, Peter.
Great, thank you very much, Martin. Before we move to the questions, I would like to give you like this fast, quick question. If you would reflect on any like memorable, notable experience you had, what would it be? Like the first thing on the go.
First thing, notable experience. DJI Osmo that I bought the other day.
Really?
It's the stabilizing tool for your phone. It's amazing. It's very intuitive to use. You don't even have to read the manual, and it's lovely. It's very well designed, thought of. Only one thing bad, but I'm not gonna spoil it for you. That's good. The overall impression is very good. I loved it.
Thank you very much. So let's dig into the questions. I'm not sure if there are questions regarding just your talk or there are some leftovers. Yeah, Veronika is asking if you have any tips on how to convince others to invest in delightful experience, because it can be quite expensive.
It can be. It actually, I was going to address in the second part a little bit, but this is actually something that we all struggle with, and this is about the product. You have to find minimal, delightful product, and this is very hard. So you have to find the smallest unit that you can deliver, but it's gonna satisfy all the levels of the pyramid. And if you are trying to enhance, this can actually be argument for product people, because it's gonna help them and it's gonna as well cut the scope a little bit. But you have to invest in delight, because it's gonna pay you back later. The user's gonna fall in love with your product, and they're gonna go back and tell their friends.
Great. All right. Since there are some leftover questions, I think that I would invite all the other speakers from today's session just to address them, and we can go one by one. So welcome back, guys. The first question with probably the most votes, and the other one would be, I think it's quite connected to that. Oh, I put it back. All right, here we go. Is by Lucia, and she's asking if you guys have any tips on how to nudge people into caring about separating observations from interpretations. I think this is for Anna. Actually.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. If anyone has any tips on that, I'm also curious about that. But like from my experience, I haven't encountered people who would not agree that it's important to discern between observations and interpretations. It's more often the problem that people don't realize that they're making this mistake, rather than not buying into the concept. So yeah, I don't know how I would convince people that it's important, other than just doing lots of training and repeating the thing again and again. I mean, we, for example, do some repeated like mock usability testing sessions with our UX designers, in which we talk not about note-taking, but about usability testing. And that's an opportunity for us all to practice the things and to hear them so many times that we don't forget them. But yeah, I think training can help a lot of things. Not sure how it could help convincing people.
Any other views, guys? Not so much. All right, so let's move on to the other one. Oh, Veronika?
No, I was just saying, like, I think Anna summed it up really nicely. I don't have anything else to add.
Yeah, I think the other one might be on a similar note. How do you limit the risk or bias of your own subjective interpretations when summarizing notes to generate insights or ensure that insights truly reflect the user?
Yeah, I think this is also a great question, and it is related for sure. So, firstly, I think the putting yourself into brackets that I mentioned is helpful. Not sure if I explained it like totally understandably, but it's really great to start by just realizing what your understanding is of a topic before you start with kind of putting the research together and analyzing your data, and even before taking notes or conducting the research. But of course, that is not enough, and we do have our biases, and that's the problem with cognition, that it is really biased. I think it's really useful to try to learn about the possible cognitive biases that people have, and try to kind of catch yourself when you're subject to such bias, or not subject, but when you're doing it. And I've got an example which we can send to chat later on. There's like some cards with different biases that people can just be aware of and try to prevent themselves from when doing user research or designing things as well. So I'll send the link later on. So that's an interesting resource, I think. You can go through those cards, for example, and learn a bit about the things that you should try to not do. I don't have other recommendations than that. Yeah.
From my point of view, there was also this thing in your talk about sharing the insights, and the part when we do, for example, usability testings, and there's multiple people there. So it's good to keep each other in check regarding this, and to take care of other people that you work with, to catch their biases for them sometimes. And you do that really well with our other researcher.
Thanks. Yeah, sharing is a good idea. Like giving feedback after sessions if there's other people joining, for example.
Yeah. All right. Another one regarding research. With tools such as Lookback that offer observation, recording, and note-taking features, do you recommend also having a colleague assist to making notes?
I was trying to look back.
Oh, I think the connection broke. So how about you guys? What's your experience from the other side? Not just being the researcher, but being the colleague who takes the notes sometimes?
I don't know the tool. So, and to be honest, I haven't used some like specialized tool for, some recording or like note taking. So I'm usually not very good at taking notes, so I don't, insist on that, on like you having someone who also takes the notes during the interview. So I usually rely on the recording, and then I do the notes myself. So I wouldn't say I recommend it, so because I don't know the tool. So yeah, as I said, I usually rely just on the recording and not other tools. I don't know. How about you, Martin? Or Anjika is back, maybe?
Yeah, I'm back. Sorry, the connection broke off just when I started to speak, so I don't know how much you heard.
Not much.
Yeah, I was just, I think I was saying something similar like you, Veronika, that I don't know the tool myself. I tried to look it up. But of course, there's also other alternatives, things that do interview transcripts for you. I mean, even if there's some way of automating the note-taking process, or if you at least are able to get some sort of transcript that you can use later on for your data analysis, it still is not perfect, and you still have to go through it. And sometimes it's also even better to make notes than just to work with a transcript, maybe, because if you take notes, you already do a certain level of like discerning what's important and what's not. And that can make your notes a bit more digestible for others as well. And at the same time, you can still manage to kind of stick to the original data. But I think if you have like a recording, it's still a good idea to get some kind of backup notes, of course, as I mentioned, because just in case something bad happens with your connection, for example.
Yeah, stuff happens all the time. All right, so another one is about collaboration between UX research and designers, and this one popped up actually during Veronica's talk in the beginning. How much of a partnership as a designer should you ideally have with a UX researcher on testing, interviews, and in the whole process?
I'm not really sure whether this is somehow connected to my talk or whether it's meant like more generally. Though, if this is meant like generally, like how much of collaboration is between researchers and designers in our company, I can say only about how it goes in our company. I can't really say what's the ideal situation. But in our case, designers are pretty independent and should be able to do research themselves, be it creating research design and conduct the testing and do the notes. So they should be able to do all the this part of the research. But we have opportunity to ask our researchers and ask for help and for feedback. So if I get the question right, I hope I answered. I don't know whether there's some ideal, ideal tip from my side. And I think how I describe it, I think for us it works really well because we are just independent designers who can do like all these things by ourselves. We're not, we don't outsource any research or like every research to our researchers. So if you guys want to add something to it.
I just think the question may have been directed a bit more towards your use case with the NGO, sorry, not non-profit organization, but I'm not sure. Like you probably didn't have like a UX researcher there, so.
No. It was just by myself. I described like there were a good help from the guys from the organization, but they did it for the first time. They did those interviews for the first time. They were not researchers, so yeah. As you said, I don't know whether I get it. I got it right. The question. So hopefully I answered somehow. And if someone wants to clarify, then please do.
Yeah, definitely. All right. The other one was, I think, just a note about Netflix and its search. So just leave it there. Another one is about how do you structure interviews in discovery phase, and especially like tooling question. So how can you look for patterns in a tool? Is there anything special you guys do? Or I think this was again directed at Anna.
I think it may have been directed a bit more at Veronika given the time, but I'm not sure.
I think it popped up during my talk, but well, I can comment on that. But I think that you research, Anička, you use some special tool for I don't know, for some like highlighting notes or stuff. I don't use anything special, so maybe you can give a comment on that.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you have any kind of interviews that you want to analyze, then as for ourselves, we use Condense. We are very happy with it. It's not as expensive as some other tools that are available, and it still enables to kind of label parts of the transcripts or notes that you have, and then like work with the labels and put things together. So that's really nice. There's other tools available as well, like Dovetail or I don't know, Enjoy Headquarters. They may be a bit more expensive, but have some other fancy possibilities and functionalities that maybe useful for someone and worth the price. I mean, if you want to try something, all those tools have usually some free trial that you can use even like to analyze some data already. So yeah, that's my recommendations probably.
Yeah. All right, and the last one was about the UX research is done in an individual way, basically. So yeah, that was just a note, I guess. Great. Thank you very much, guys, for your attention and for your talks. It was very, very enriching and very surprising. Some learnings and some experiences you gathered all the time. Thank you very much again for this. I will just have to plug in one thing, and thank you especially our viewers, of course. Without you, that it was the main motivation. We did this for you. So thank you for your time. I hope that it was time well spent. And what's ahead of us? There will be more events coming, not just from Kentico Design, but from our other colleagues from Agile community and developer community as well. So just if you want to stay in touch and if you want to know what's new, just go to this address, this URL. I think that next on the schedule there will be an Agile meetup at the end of May, if I'm correct, and also at the end of the May, I think there's just a couple days between these events. There will be another design hour as well. So just be aware and be on the lookout for this. And once again, thank you very much for your attention and for your time. There will be a recording on the YouTube, so you can just share it and go back to it if you want. Please stay in touch. If you want, just connect with us, with any of us on LinkedIn, and ask any further questions. So thank you very much, and
Thank you.
have a great evening.
Bye.
Good evening.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Bye.